and let us all do we can to build a better future.
So here's an interesting case. I was actually just poking around and found this article in the San Francisco Chronicle. And it's written by Edward Wasserman. He is a professor of journalism at Berkeley, was former dean of the department. And he is by no means a fan of Project Veritas, James O'Keefe. That is the kind of the right wing hoaxer journalists who go around and try to catch so-called liberals or leftists in gotcha situations. Some cases using very leading questions, sometimes using deceptive editing, and they will try to make so-called leftists or liberals look bad. They've been around for a while. They've been doing their thing. We're all aware of it. So what apparently happened is that somebody from their organization went to a political consultancy and essentially applied for a job, was able to get a hold of their equipment, was able to actually get into certain situations and do some tapings that were then used by Project Veritas to make leftists or liberals look bad. The ruse was eventually discovered. Democracy Partners decided to sue Project Veritas for damages. And what has happened is that there was an award to Democracy Partners saying that Project Veritas, it largely arguing that because deception was used, this is bad, and Project Veritas should be punished for this. Now, Professor Wasserman is saying something a little different. He's saying, look, I don't like Project Veritas. I don't like what they do. I don't like how this is happening or how they operate. He said, but deception in journalism has a long history. And it's used in investigative reporting all the time, particularly when you are up against a system that is so incredibly corrupt that there is no clean way to go in there and to get the information that they need. One of the things that he pointed out was a story here, thing that happened here in Chicago, which was the Mirage, which was essentially reporters from the Chicago Sun-Times back in the 70s set up a saloon here in Chicago and used it to tape city officials taking bribes. They actually got them liquored up and did that. I mean, that's pretty extreme, but when you have a city as corrupt as Chicago, probably not a bad idea. Nellie Bly, who went into a mental institution, and pretended to be a patient to expose the horrific conditions of mental institutions. There is a history of deception in investigative journalism. It's not what anybody really wants to do. It brings about its own set of ethical questions. But as Professor Wasserman points out in this article, this ruling, which Project Veritas is going to appeal, could have a chilling effect on journalism across the board. And people need to be aware of that. We've already seen this happening to independent journalists.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular, we've already seen the kind of chilling effect that we've had, say, for example, on social media platforms, the kind of censorship. We can talk about a certain somebody.
A guy who is right now fighting for his life somewhere in the European hemisphere. His name is Jules. That's all I could really say. And then there's another person who's a whistleblower who's somewhere snowed in on the Asian continent.
Somewhere, yes. So we know that this sort of thing can happen when you allow governments and courts to start saying, who is a real journalist? What is a real journalistic technique? And this ruling could have a chilling effect on how journalism, no matter what you think of James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, or their tactics, or their mission. Doesn't matter.
All I know
this could have a chilling effect on journalists.
All I know is when people, because here's what has me concerned with this ruling too, and this is no means a defense of James O'Keefe or Project Veritas, but it is something that I've seen when you have people. I can't say his full name. AJ, for example, 2018. He's okay. AJ, good friend of Joe Rogan, been on the show a few times, right? When he was kicked off of social media, that's like giving him the political ammunition for him to say, well, see, they've always been after me. But also when they went after Trump, what did that lead to? It led to further suppression and censorship. Okay. And who was impacted the most? What was it? Trump supporters? Okay. An argument can be made, but also a lot of progressives, independents, libertarians, activists, organizers, a lot of people calling out the neoliberal corporate system. Anyone that went against the narrative was immediately vilified and censored. Hardlands Media, we've been censored at least 7 times already for BS reasons. And we won all 7 of our strikes, right? Because we were in the right. But it's just maddening to know that this is, again, how things are going to get worse. And so I did hold on to the audacity of hope that maybe things would get better. But I was incredibly wrong. And that's why we built up these other alternative platforms on Rockfin, on Odyssey, on Rumble, because this is the only way we could still keep our voices out there, because the censorship is going to get worse. It is going to be really bad for a lot of your favorite journalists and independent media outlets. And I don't care what your political ideology is. If you're cheering for this, just be ready to see your favorite content creator, your favorite media outlet, being censored too. It's only a matter of time. We are all on this boat together. And as soon as you start dictating what can be covered, what can be censored, what can be viewed by the people, you're not living in a democracy anymore. You're living in a nightmare. And I think we all know what kind of nightmare that is.
And I think the other thing is there's nothing stopping other journalists, other media outlets from exposing what they believe are dirty journalistic techniques. That there's nothing stopping us from saying, okay, we don't like what this organization is doing under the guise of investigative journalism, and we're going to expose it in our own right. And that is what exists, and that's why it is so critical that we have multiple media outlets in all markets, the local level, the global level, federal, national level, so that each of these organizations can shine light on each other. That's how you maintain accountability in media.
Absolutely.
When you shut down a technique, techniques which are admittedly controversial and admittedly problematic, but have also proven over time to be absolutely critical in exposing wrongdoing. When you allow that to happen, have that chilling effect, think about the impact on our society.
I also want to bring this up here too, and that is something that we want to make ourselves different than corporate media. For example, we here at Heartlands Media are not going to tell you what to think or how to feel. Corporate media is designed to make you feel a certain way and to give you talking points that, well, I guess maybe you might politically align with, right? We here at Heartlands Media, we report the news, we tell you what's covering, we give you our coverage and perspective, but we expect all of you to come up with your own conclusions, just not agree with us, all right, but to come up with your own conclusions and to also come up with your own truths as well, okay? The whole idea of journalism, the whole idea of independent media is to cover stories and give a perspective that you don't see on corporate media. And unfortunately, the corporations and big tech and the political establishment are winning. And this is why we need independent media, because so many people have been successfully brainwashed into thinking that everything's fine. It's perfectly fine that there are starving people in America. It's perfectly fine that you're drinking contaminated water. It's perfectly fine that we have medical bankruptcy. It's perfectly fine that we have student debt that's going to cripple our economy. It's perfectly fine that people are being evicted from our homes and apartments. It's perfectly fine that our infrastructure is falling apart. It's perfectly fine that, again, we have an opioid crisis. We have the largest prison industrial complex here in America. We have, again, unending war. All of this is perfectly fine. So to quote the Joker from The Dark Knight, if I were to go to the media right now and say the truck full of soldiers is going to get blown up or a gangbanger is going to get shot in the street, nobody's going to panic, because the establishment media, the political ruling class, have done a phenomenal job in brainwashing the American people. This is what it looks like to live in a neoliberal nightmare. And this is why I stand against censorship. And this is why I'm for free speech.
Yeah. And they pointed out that Project Veritas has a lot of money. They can fight this, and they plan to do so. And it absolutely does stick in my craw that I'm having to back them. But I am absolutely doing it. And I do think in this case, they are absolutely fighting the good fight. And this is, again, another case that bears watching, because what if it happened to us?
Yep.
What if it happened to, Convo Couch or any of the other groups out there that are doing such good work and that don't have the kind of resources that Project Veritas does? I mean, they could be wiped out.
I agree. Yeah, so I got a final note for this. Support free speech, support independent media.
Absolutely.